It all began on a Thursday afternoon, just as the last rays of sunlight were spilling through the classroom windows. I had spent the whole day teaching literature, my favorite subject, my passion, yet I was more tired than I expected. Papers to grade, discussions to guide, a classroom full of restless minds. By the time the final bell rang, I was ready to collapse. As my students shuffled out, chatting and laughing, one of them lingered behind. I didn't recognize the hesitation at first. He was always quiet, polite, and never one to draw attention to himself. His name is Daniel. Tall, with that awkward, thoughtful energy that makes you feel like he's thinking a step ahead of everyone else. He walked slowly toward me, a little nervous, and cleared his throat. "Miss Turner," he said softly, "do you have a moment?" I looked up from stacking my papers, surprised. "Of course, Daniel. What's on your mind?" I expected the usual, a question about an assignment, maybe a clarification about a reading. But there was something in his tone that made me pause. It was quieter, gentler, like he was trying to carefully measure his words. He shifted from foot to foot, hands tucked into his backpack straps. I just wanted a minute alone, if that's okay," he said. And just like that, the room felt different. The buzzing fluorescent lights seemed softer, the faint smell of chalk and old books more comforting than ever. I nodded, gesturing toward an empty corner by the window. We settled into the space, the afternoon light brushing across his face in a way that made every freckle and shadow stand out. He took a deep breath, and I realized I wasn't just curious anymore. I was waiting for something I didn't even know existed. Then he spoke. "I've been meaning to tell you. I think you've changed the way I see things this year. Your class, the way you talk about the stories, it's more than just school. It's like you make me see the world differently. And I just wanted you to know that." I blinked, caught off guard, not because of the compliment, but because of the honesty in his eyes. It wasn't flirtation, it wasn't expectation. It was pure, heartfelt appreciation. And in that instant, something shifted inside me. Something that reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place, not for grades or recognition, but for moments like this, where connection feels real and undeniable. We lingered there for a while, talking about literature, about life, about the small moments that matter more than anything else. There was a subtle tension, yes, but it was warm and electric in a way that made my heart thrum with quiet excitement rather than alarm. I realized how rare it is to meet someone who makes you feel seen without trying, and how much I had missed that feeling. By the time he left, the sun had dipped lower, painting the room in amber hues. I watched him walk away, backpack slung over his shoulder, a shy smile playing on his lips. And I knew, whatever this was, it had changed me too. The next morning, I found myself thinking about Daniel more than I expected. It wasn't unusual for me to care about my students. I cared deeply. But this was different. There was a weight to it, a pull I hadn't felt in years. I caught myself replaying his words, the way he had looked at me with that unguarded honesty. The kind of look that makes you wonder how someone could see right into your chest without trying to. The classroom felt unusually quiet that day. My students were scattered around, working on their essays, but my attention kept drifting to the empty seat where Daniel usually sat. When he arrived, he hesitated at the door, like he wasn't sure if he should come in or turn around. When our eyes met, he gave that small, shy smile that seemed to tug at something deep inside me. After class, he lingered again. I wasn't surprised this time. I was almost expecting it. "Miss Turner," he began, and I noticed the slight quiver in his voice. "Can I talk to you about something? A bit personal?" I gestured to the back of the classroom, the same quiet corner bathed in the soft light from the window. He sat down across from me, his posture hesitant but earnest. There was a kind of intimacy in this ordinary space. The desks, the chalkboard, the faint smell of dust and books. that made the world outside seem distant. I've always felt a bit invisible, he admitted, eyes fixed on his hands. Not in a mean way, just unnoticed. But your class, it's like you see me, really see me. And it makes me, I don't know, it makes me feel like I belong somewhere. His words hit me harder than I expected. I've spent years trying to reach students who struggle with connection, but there was a difference here. This was raw, honest emotion. He wasn't asking for praise or sympathy. He was offering a piece of his inner world, trusting me with it. I leaned forward slightly. Daniel, thank you for telling me that. I can't tell you how much it means to hear it. You matter more than you realize, and I'm glad my class can be a place where you feel seen. There was a pause, the kind that stretches long enough for a heartbeat to echo in your chest. I noticed the faint tremble in his jaw, the way his hands fidgeted with the strap of his backpack. And I realized that these moments, the quiet admissions, the small confessions, were where real connection lived. Not in grand gestures, but in the little unspoken exchanges that left you feeling understood. I've been writing a lot about the things I feel but can't say out loud, he said, eyes flicking up to mine. And I think maybe you could read some of it, if you wanted to. The request was simple, yet it carried weight. There was vulnerability there that made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. I nodded, keeping my voice calm, though my heart raced. I'd be honored, Daniel. You don't have to worry about judgment here. As we sat there, the classroom quiet and golden in the afternoon light, I felt a strange but comforting closeness. It wasn't about romance, not yet. Not about boundaries or labels. It was about the human need to be seen, to share something deeply personal and know it won't be discarded. I realized then that life has a way of surprising you, often in the quietest corners of your day, with moments that shift you without warning. By the time he left, the hallway felt emptier, but my mind was buzzing with the warmth of his words. There was something unfolding here, something subtle and tender, and I knew I had to pay attention, not rush it, let it breathe. It was rare to find a connection like this, rare to meet someone who opens a door in your heart without knocking, and I wanted to honor it. Days passed, but I couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation. It wasn't a thrill in the usual sense. It was softer, deeper, like standing on the edge of a memory you haven't lived yet. Every time Daniel walked into the classroom, I felt that same quiet tug in my chest. I had to remind myself constantly, he's a student, but there was something about the way he moved, the way he lingered in small moments, that made the space between us feel charged in a completely unexpected way. That Thursday, I stayed behind after class longer than usual, pretending to organize papers but really just waiting. When Daniel approached, I noticed he was holding a notebook in his hands, his fingers brushing over the cover like it was something fragile. Miss Turner, he said softly, I wrote something about how I feel. His voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the weight of sharing something intimate. Show me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He handed me the notebook, and as I opened it, I felt an odd mixture of responsibility and privilege. His words were raw, beautiful, and surprisingly mature. Thoughts on identity, on the small ways the world can feel cold, on the warmth he found in unexpected places. And beneath all that, the most tender line, a note of gratitude for the way I had seen him. I looked up, and he was watching me intently. You don't have to say anything, he murmured. I just wanted you to know. And that was the moment I realized just how rare this was, a connection not built on flattery, not built on expectation, but on shared vulnerability. My throat tightened. Daniel, this is incredible. Thank you for trusting me with this. He shifted, uneasy under the weight of his own bravery, and then he said something that caught me completely off guard. I don't know why, but I feel like I can tell you anything. Like you really understand me. And I think that's why I had to stay behind, why I had to ask for this moment. For a moment, I was speechless. I had always prided myself on being approachable, supportive, but this was different. He wasn't asking for guidance. He wasn't fishing for praise. He was offering a piece of himself, the part that rarely touched the outside world, and trusting me to hold it carefully. We stayed there in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that isn't empty. It's full of thought, full of unspoken words, full of something tender and fragile. And in that quiet, I felt a wave of clarity. This was about more than student and teacher, more than mentorship. It was about human connection in its purest form, the recognition that two people can see each other and, for a brief time, understand. Finally, he gathered the courage to speak again. I just wanted you to know that you've made a bigger difference than you might ever realize, not just in class, but in how I see myself. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. And you've reminded me why I do this, Daniel. You've reminded me why we reach out, why we try to connect. You've made me see that the smallest gestures, the quietest moments, can mean the most. He smiled then, that shy, tentative smile that somehow carried the weight of everything he had just shared. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. Life has a way of teaching you lessons when you least expect them, often through the people who challenge your assumptions, who open your heart with nothing but honesty. As he left the classroom, notebook in hand, the afternoon sunlight catching his hair, I felt a strange mix of melancholy and anticipation. This was no longer just a story about teaching. It was a story about discovering a connection that neither of us had anticipated, a bond built on trust, empathy, and quiet revelation. And I knew deep down that our journey was far from over. The following week, I found myself walking into the classroom with a quiet sense of anticipation. I had been thinking about Daniel constantly, the notebook, his words, the way he had trusted me so completely. Teaching had always been my calling, but lately it felt like something bigger was unfolding, something that went beyond lesson plans and grading papers. Daniel arrived early that day, as if he knew I would be waiting. There was a softness in his movements, a calmness that suggested he had wrestled with his own thoughts and come to some kind of quiet resolve. He approached me with the same tentative respect, the same careful honesty that had first drawn me in. "Miss Turner," he said, almost whispering, "I wanted to talk to you one more time, if that's okay." I smiled, my chest full of warmth. "Of course, Daniel. You always have my time." We sat in our corner again, sunlight streaming in dust motes dancing lazily in the air. This time there was a comfort between us, a shared understanding that didn't need to be spoken aloud. He opened his notebook, but instead of reading, he looked at me and said, "I just want you to know, meeting you, talking to you, it's changed me. It's made me braver, made me more willing to put myself out there. And I hope I've given you something in return, even if just a little." I felt a lump in my throat. "Daniel, you've given me more than you realize. You've reminded me what it feels like to be seen, truly seen, in a world that often rushes past." He smiled then, shy but full of quiet pride. There was a pause, a shared breath, and I realized how rare this was, this delicate mutual understanding between two people. There was no rush, no urgency, no expectation. Just a recognition that human connection, in its simplest form, could be transformative. For the next hour we talked, not about assignments or grades, not about obligations, but about life, about fears, about small victories and the little moments that shape us. Each word built a bridge between us, a bridge made of honesty, respect, and gentle curiosity. It was a conversation that could have lasted forever, a rare meeting of minds and hearts. Eventually, the light shifted, golden giving way to the softer hues of late afternoon. Daniel closed his notebook, and I felt a pang of bittersweet awareness that this chapter, as it were, was coming to a close. He stood, backpack slung over his shoulder, and gave me a nod that carried gratitude, respect, and something unspoken, something tender. "Thank you, Miss Turner," he said softly, "for seeing me, for listening, for everything." I watched him leave, the classroom now quiet, and I sat there for a long time reflecting. Life had a way of surprising you, often in moments you think are ordinary. And sometimes the people you least expect can teach you the most about empathy, about courage, about the quiet beauty of being fully seen. I realized, too, that my own heart had grown a little larger, more open, because of this unexpected connection. It wasn't a story about crossing boundaries or doing anything inappropriate. It was a story about trust, honesty, and the subtle, profound ways we affect each other's lives. And as I gathered my things, the sun dipping below the horizon, I smiled to myself, knowing that moments like these, fleeting, precious, quietly life-changing, were the ones we carry with us forever.